From here on out, we're gonna be partners. And I'll do it all totally free of charge. Although, if you really want to thank me, I wouldn't say no to a couple of donuts.
You know, you could just ask for something to eat if you're hungry.
Ow! Hey! Get back, you guys! Who said I was Monster Munchies?
This furball's not like other felines, huh? But hey, you got an egg out of the deal. Wanna head home?
Monster Hunter Stories 2 was released at the beginning of July of this year. The game is a turn-based RPG that obviously takes place in the Monster Hunter universe. It's pretty interesting because we don't normally see Capcom release too many turn-based RPGs. The only other game that comes to mind is Breath of Fire, and if you really want to stretch out the definition of turn-based, then Mega Man Battle Network, I guess. But putting that aside, this is one of the finest RPGs I've played this year. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not the biggest Monster Hunter fan out there. I understand why people love this series, and I do see the appeal of taking down a big monster that's been giving you a tough fight. It looks awesome. I've played a little bit of World on PC and the demos on 3DS, but it was just something I could never get into. I just wasn't a big fan of the learning curve and the grind that came with it. It all felt too daunting. I thought I would never get into these games, but playing Stories 2 has completely changed my thoughts on the entire franchise. When I watched that first trailer back in late 2020, I knew things would be different with this entry. The main story of the game is as follows. You are a young and upcoming writer, and notice that all the Rathalos, these red dragon thingies on your island, fly off into the horizon, leaving only an egg of their species behind. There's also the mystery of why many of the monsters in the world have gone berserk, and you need to find out what it is that's behind this strange phenomenon. The Rathalos harbored in that egg is said to be cursed, but being the only one of its kind left in the world, it's up to you to discover the mystery if Ratha will be the key to solving these abnormalities of these deranged monsters in the world, or if it'll bring ruin and destruction to all that it faces. The game's story is pretty cut and dry. It's the type of story you would normally see in your typical 4-kid Saturday morning anime show back in the day, but I'm not criticizing that. I was very much invested in what was going to happen to my little Ratha and how the plot thickens when it came to the behaviors of these deranged monsters you encounter. The characters you meet along the journey are all a treat too. They don't have deep lore and complex motives, but they each have their own personality to make them stand out from one another. I will say that Anna, the main female companion that travels with you, is pretty boring. I really like her character design, but compared to the other characters you meet, she's kinda bleh. And I wish the other characters you met in each area had a bit more to do than just staying with you for that short amount of time. I need more Kana and Alwyn, Capcom. Stories 2 is also downright gorgeous. It's probably one of the best looking games I've ever played on the Switch. The game isn't trying to go for a realism aesthetic like from World or Rise. It definitely looks more anime than what you would find in those games, and this art style fits well with the nature of the game. You aren't just killing monsters you come across, you're forming bonds with these monsters and raising them. They're here to help you out and aren't just another force of nature to slay. And some of these monsters can just be so darn cute. It was nice going into a new area seeing which monsters you can add to your party. It's that same type of feeling I get when I play the Pokemon games. And yes, you can pet the monsties in this game. The jump from 3DS to an HD platform benefited this game a lot. In Stories 1, the game had this chibi, cutesy art style. Everything felt small, from the human characters to the monster designs. In Stories 2, monsters aren't fully sized like they are in the mainline entries, but they're a lot bigger in here than in the prior games. I think this change was a great move on Capcom. The first game didn't look all that appealing to me, it looked too much like a child's game. But the sequel fixes that by just making the characters and monster designs bigger. It feels a bit more mature to play. That being said, the game still has its cute and funny moments, and I do admit it does add some charm to the game. And if the game abandoned some of those charming moments, the game would be a bit too generic for my taste. The game is a turn-based RPG with some Monster Hunter elements thrown into the mix. You have a handful of familiar weapons like the Greatsword and Gun Lance. There's also items like Wheatstones to raise critical hits, Pitfall Traps to stun enemies, and of course all types of different potions. Longtime fans will feel right at home when it comes to recognizing such staples. The bread and butter of the game's combat system revolves around a rock, paper, scissors mechanic, named respectively as power, technical, and speed attacks. Power beats tech, tech beats speed, and speed beats power. When you go into combat, you get a chance to choose one of these types before striking your enemy. You'll know if the enemy is going to attack one of your party members indicated by the beam of light when they're faced with their prey. If you and the enemy monster are going to attack each other before you take your turn, you'll get the chance to negate their action if you win one of these rock paper scissors matches. If your monster is also targeting the same monster as you, you'll have the chance to perform a double attack. As long as both of you use the same attack type and win the face-off, the double attack will succeed. Double attacks are some of the best in the game since they do more damage than traditional attacks, can skip an enemy's turn, and also fill up a Kinship Meter. More on that later. You can also equip up to 3 weapon types on your character. These types are Slash, Blunt, and Pierce. And these weapons are more than just stat differences from one another like in other RPGs. Each weapon has its own unique skills and playstyle. For instance, the hammer has a charge meter that fills up with each head-to-head battle you win. Once you fill it up to a certain amount, you'll be able to use skills and deal huge damage. My favorite weapon was the Gun Lance. After every turn, you get 1 bullet. If you win a head-to-head battle, you also get another bullet that same turn. Once you have enough munitions, you can use a skill to charge up your Kinship Meter drastically. My point I'm trying to make here is that everyone will have their own way when it comes to taking down these monsters. You'll definitely want to experiment with what weapon best suits your game plan. Series veterans know that different types are effective against different monster parts like legs, wings, stomach, etc. Upon breaking these parts, you'll usually prevent a monster from using a high damage move, knock them down for a while, and also acquire more item drops. It feels really good to break something like a tail after a monster has been using it to damage your entire team. There's a great sense of satisfaction when it comes to this. Your party will usually consist of 2 to 4 members at a time, that being your player character, your monstie, a buddy character, and sometimes their monstie. You will only be able to directly control the actions of your own character. Monsties and partner buddies all choose their commands at their own free will. But you will get to choose your own monstie skills during combat in case you want them to choose a different action. In doing so will cost some points. You're able to carry 6 different monsties in your party. You're gonna want to have a variety of monsties with different attack types to keep in your party in case you want to use someone that favors one attack over the other. Speaking of skill points, there's this thing called a Kinship Meter. Every action you take in combat slowly fills this meter up. When winning head-to-head battles, it fills up a lot, and as mentioned before, using double attacks will fill it up even more. Once maxed out, you'll get the option to unleash a powerful kinship skill. These are flashy over-the-top moves that can pack some serious damage. That's basically the gist of combat. Win head-to-head battles, break parts, fill up the kinship gauge to dominate your enemies, rinse and repeat. And I really enjoy this combat system. When I first heard about how battles work, I didn't think it would be that engaging. When I think of rock, paper, scissors, I think of a game based on luck. You would really never know the outcome of the match until you're locked into your choice, but actually experiencing the gameplay changed my mind. Every monster you encounter has their own attack type they favor. They'll keep using the same attacks in battle until they start showing signs of either aggression or some kind of stance change. The game of guessing your opponent's next move doesn't occur until these sign changes, making battles much less about a game of chance and more about learning their attack patterns. Some people may argue that the game is easy because every enemy you face off will have their own attack pattern you can memorize, and I will say that's a fair argument, but there's been countless times where I forgot what the opponent was going to do, and I would be severely punished for forgetting, because I'm just feeling like an idiot that day, I don't know. So the game is constantly keeping you on your toes, making sure you understand how each monster will attack. If you lose a head-to-head battle after multiple attempts of fighting that same monster, it's your own fault. It's a very simple combat system with just enough depth for players who want to tinker around with the most efficient way to defeat these monsters. Now I will admit, it's not a perfect system. When I said if you lose a head-to-head battle, it's your own fault. There will be a number of times when your other party members will use attacks or skills when it results in them losing their head-to-head matches. This is one of the unfair parts of the game. This isn't a big deal early on, but near the end of the game, it becomes a bit of a problem. There were multiple times where I knew what the opponent's next move was going to be, but because they chose to face off with my buddy, I had no control over their action, resulting in them taking massive damage. It was infuriating to say the least. So when it comes to that, you just have to pray. Pray they won't be a complete dumbass and not use the same move that'll cost them their life. Outside of combat, you'll be visiting beautiful landscapes varying in all types. There's your typical snow area, desert area, and so on. Each location, as you'd expect, has their own monsters that roam around the land. Usually when wandering about these fields, you'll come across procedurally generated dens. This is where you'll find monster eggs, usually from the same type of monsters within that same field. Your feline partner Naviru will be able to give you vague hints as to if the monster in the egg has good stats or skills and whatnot. I usually didn't listen to what he said and would just keep searching for an egg until it started glowing, since those are usually the ones that have the better skills. You can make other dens of a specific monster to appear on the map when you're fighting that monster in battle. By throwing a paintball just before the monster is defeated, it will retreat and force a den to spawn. Once inside, the eggs you receive will always be from that monster you just faced off against. I honestly rarely did this unless I wanted a very specific monster in my party, since most of the monsters I used were acquired from the other dens that would appear randomly in the overworld. As I previously stated, after every battle, monsters will drop items related to them. Depending on how well you did in that battle and how many parts you managed to break, you'll be greatly rewarded with item drops. These materials are used to craft new weapons and armor pieces. And this is what really hooked me into the game. It's so addicting using those materials to forge the next best armor or weapon piece. There's just so many weapons and armor sets to drip your character into. Unlike the mainline series, you do not need to fight a monster too many times to get the materials you need. The most I had to face against a monster to farm materials was about 3 times, at least for the early to mid-tier monsters. Towards the end of the game, the higher ranked equipment required more materials, resulting in facing those monsters more. Still, I became obsessed, breaking body parts and using those to make equipment, only to then face against a new monster to get their drops, to then make even more equipment, etc, etc. Now I can see why my cousin spent over 200 hours in Monster Hunter World. This is also a very meaty game. The main adventure should only take about 35 to 40-ish hours to complete, but there are a ton of extra things to do outside of the main story. There's a bunch of side quests to complete. Some will just require you to collect materials or slay monsters, but there are some you'll want to do in order to get extra skills for your weapons. Not the greatest variety of quests, but they're still there if you want to take a break from the main story and just grind a bit. I ended up just accepting every quest that came up on the quest board and would complete them if they were in line with me progressing through the main story. Then there's trial quests that test your skills against a number of monsters. Defeating said monsters in a certain number of turns will net you a handful of rewards, and then at the end of the game there's high rank monsters. These are stronger versions of monsters you've seen on the journey thus far. Defeating these monsters will reward you in better drop materials, which in turn will get you better weapons and equipments. Oh god, here comes the grind again. This isn't necessary to do since it's available once you beat the game, but for players who crave more, you'll have a good time with what's left after the final boss. Multiplayer is of course one of the main staples of this series, so it would be off if it wasn't here. You can do co-op quests where you explore dens, do trial quests where you face off monsters in an arena, or do PvP matches. To be honest, I didn't do much multiplayer in this game, mainly because I have no friends that have the same taste as me, but the game will connect you with randoms if you so wish to and have no one else to play with. You can also do these co-op quests alone. By doing so, the game will match you with a random NPC buddy. I wish this wasn't the case, and it would have been nice to just go on one of these quests with one of the other buddies you've met on the journey instead of a generic NPC. The game is also getting free multiple updates as I speak, adding new monsters, equipment, and quests to partake in. and I really like this idea. Monster Hunter fans are used to a good amount of post-launch content and events, and it's neat to see Capcom is doing the same with this game even though it's a spin-off. It makes it feel like they put the effort to make sure that Stories 2 players are getting the same sort of experience mainline players have gotten in the past. Good job, Capcom. Monster Hunter Stories 2 managed to exceed almost all my expectations. The game is absolutely stunning with its environment and character designs. The change in the art style was something I was looking forward to the most, and the gameplay managed to be fun and engaging all the way through till the end. Although the buddy AI could be a bit better. Quests are also plentiful but can feel mundane when it comes to the ones that don't offer any significant reward. But this game's package as a whole is just superb. With that being said, I'm going to have to give this game a rating of an A-. Although I listed many positives like the art style, varied gameplay mechanics, and post-game content, I'll have to knock off a few points when it comes to the partner AI, bland side quests, and a very okay story. The story by all means isn't bad, it's just a bit dry. But it managed to keep things entertaining with likable characters you meet along the way. And to be fair, the story of Monster Hunter games aren't always the focal point of these titles. I've actually started to play a bit of Monster Hunter World now that I actually have a better understanding of some of these monsters and how the grind works in these games. Also, even though I did say that it's one of the best looking Switch games I've played, that's not without its shortcomings. The game's frame rate would chug at certain points. Not a huge deal for me personally, but something you may want to consider when picking the game up. Luckily, it is available on Steam as well, and it looks so much better on a higher end machine. The game is still very much playable on Switch regardless, just something to keep in mind. Hopefully Capcom can build on the foundation of Stories 2 in the future, but as it stands now, this is one of the best RPGs I've had the pleasure of playing this year. And that's gonna be it for this video. Thanks for sticking to the end, and if you enjoyed what you've seen, please remember to click that like button, subscribe for more content like this, and share this video if you know anyone who has the slightest bit of interest in Monster Hunter games. Until next time, later.